There's one thing that I think we all have in common, and that is that at one time or another, there's been a time when we have felt like really awkward or maybe even a little embarrassed when we realized that what we thought was true, what we thought we knew or what we thought was the case actually turned out to be something quite different. And, this is why I think this is something that we can all relate to, right? I mean, we've all experienced that on some level, that rude awakening. Yes? And so, there are plenty of different opinions floating around our culture right now, in terms of conspiracy theories and hoaxes and schemes. But that's not what I'm going to be speaking about today. What we're going to do today is to go a little deeper into how our thoughts work together so that we can create the space, so that we can have those aha moments, those, I should have had a V8, those moments, right? And so we are continuing right along with our Back to Basics series that I call Unity in a Nutshell 2021. This is based on our 5 basic unity principles. And this morning, we're going to dive into principle number 3. But I want to hit the pause button for just a moment so that we can do a really super quick little review of principle 1 and principle 2. So now in principle 1, we looked at the nature of God, that God is absolute good, everywhere present. And I also asked you to think about what you believe about God right now today in your life. Not what you were taught to believe when you were a child, but what do you believe about God today? And to give yourself permission and the freedom to have this sort of grown up understanding of God. In principle number 2, which was last week, we looked at the nature of our own divinity, the divinity of humanity, because we believe that God is everywhere present. That means that we also are a spark of this very divinity. And we also have faith in the scriptures, as the scriptures tell us, that we were born and are born into original blessing, not sin, which is why we relate to the statement, born fine the first time. We do love that phrase, right? Born fine the first time, meaning there's really no conversion required. And more importantly is to understand that our life is meant to be an expression of God, right? A spark of this divinity. That is what we are here to do, to be an expression. Sometimes we say we are the hands and feet and the very breath of God. And so what is ours to do is to be the presence of God. Amen. Now, if you missed either of these messages, you can always go to our Unity of Arlington YouTube channel and you can check them out there. So today, we're going to dive right into the 3rd principle, which is human beings create their experiences by the activity of their thinking. Everything in the manifest realm begins with thought. Everything begins in thought. Now, another fun way of saying this is thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Now, we love a good pithy phrase in Unity, and this is the one that we use with this principle. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Would somebody be willing to write that in the chat box for me? thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Now, I like to always add here that it's not the fleeting thoughts. No, it's not the ones that just kind of come and go. We're talking about the ones that we hold on to in our mind, you know, the ones that create a groove in our consciousness, kind of like, remember when we used to play an LP record on a turntable? You remember, like, if something got stuck in a groove, it would just repeat, and repeat. That's what we're talking about here. Those thoughts that just repeat. Now, there are also those thoughts that are subconscious, right? But today we're talking about those ones that just repeat. So in a nutshell, what this third principle boils down to is life is consciousness. And the thoughts that we think and the words that we speak are not only formative, but they also play a leading role in what shows up in our lives, right? I mean, this is why this one principle alone is called the granddaddy of all spiritual laws. Now, of course, the idea that our thoughts influence what we're creating, this isn't unique to Unity. It's not new to Unity. It's been around for quite some time. For instance, more than 2,500 years ago, the Buddha said, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. In the book of Proverbs, in the Hebrew scriptures, it is written, for as a man thinketh, so in his heart is he or she. And in Romans, from the Christian scriptures, do not conform to this world, but be ye transformed by what? By the renewing of your mind. By the renewing of your mind. Now, if none of these work for you, there's a classic saying that pretty much sums it all up. What you focus on expands in your life. Let me just say that again, because it doesn't really get more straightforward than that. What you focus on is what expands in your life. Now, I want to share a story with you, and this is one of my favorites. It's just one of my favorites. And it's about a woman who was waiting for her flight at an airport one day. Now, of course, this was pre-COVID, right? So she bought a book and she bought a bag of cookies. And she was totally absorbed in reading her book when she noticed that there was a man sitting next to her that was kind of casually also eating cookies from this same bag. Well, I mean, she was annoyed by this. And so one after another, this cookie thief continued to eat her cookies. She would eat a cookie and then he would eat a cookie right down to the very last one. And then he held up this last cookie in front of her, broke it in half, and then actually started to offer her half of the cookie. Well, that was it. So she just grabbed this cookie out of his hand and stormed off because she was incensed at this point. So imagine her surprise when just a few minutes later, when she went to reach for her boarding pass in her purse, she found her own bag of cookies unopened. So it turns out that the man had actually been very gracious throughout this little ordeal, and he had actually been sharing his cookies with her. Now, of course, she was mortified by this, especially since it was way too late for her to go back and apologize. So again, I think that we have all experienced something like this, some kind of moment like this to some degree, right? I mean, we've all been there when we realize that what we thought was true, that what we thought we knew, what we thought was the case actually turns out to be something quite different. And, there are some of us, after the presidential inauguration last Wednesday, there are some of us in our country who are actually going through this right now. Yeah. The philosopher Marcus Aurelius, I think he actually said this best. He said, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. The quality of your thoughts. I would also say the quality of your questions. And so the essence of this teaching is that, you basically function like a tuning fork, and all of your thoughts and feelings act like a vibrational tone. And this vibrational tone is what broadcasts your song. It's what broadcasts your sound. It's what broadcasts your unique frequency. And so plain and simple, if you're vibrating joy, then you are going to experience more joy. If you're vibrating doom and gloom, then you are going to experience more doom and gloom. You see, the quality of your thoughts and your feelings are also it creates the energy, right? That is actually creating the consciousness, which is leading to your life, what's showing up in your life and how you are creating your life. So let me just say that again. The quality of your thoughts and the energy of your feelings are creating the consciousness that is leading your life. Amen? This is why you hear me say, you have to mind your mind. You have to train your brain. You have to understand that as a human tuning fork, you are resonating with other human tuning forks at the same vibrational frequency. And the energy of your thoughts and the energy of your feelings cannot help but be in alignment with what you're putting out and what others are putting out on that same frequency. Is this making sense? Are you with me? And so, in other words, you have to learn. You have to mind your mind. You have to train your brain. You have to learn to focus on what you do want, not on what you don't want. And so many of us spend so much time complaining and kvetching and talking about what we don't want instead of what we do want. And we talk about what we don't want actually just by default. Now, in her book, The 5 Principles by Ellen Davenport, again, highly recommend this. Now, in her book, she acknowledges this challenge. And so here's what she says. Focusing on what we want is never more difficult than when something we don't want has already occurred. And this is so true. I have to tell you, all of the leading teachers who speak about law of mind action will tell you this, which is why practice is so important. Once something has already shown up, it requires a little more from us, right? So it's really best if you can get ahead of it and stay in practice so you have less of those things showing up that you do not want, right? All right, so I got sidetracked there. Here we go. Focusing on what we want is never more difficult than when something we don't want has already occurred. The hurdle then is not only to change our thoughts, but to actually feel as if the unwanted event is not happening, or conversely, to feel what we do want rather than reacting to what is in the moment. And so again, in the midst of any circumstance, we always have to pivot. We have to shift. We have to shift our focus to what we do want, not what we don't want. Now, What we don't want can help, for a minute, because that's the place from which we can determine contrast, right? So it's okay to recognize what you don't want. You just do not want to stay in those thoughts and that energy. Make sense? And so this also reminds me what Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore had to say about our thoughts and how we can actually deal with them. So here's what he said. You can do anything with the thoughts of your mind. You can direct them, coerce them, hush them, or crush them. You can dissolve one thought and put another one in its stead. And so the very good news today is that you absolutely can change and evolve your consciousness. You can do this. But how? I mean, that's the question, right? That's where the rubber meets the road. How? I mean, how do you hush them and crush them when they're on repeat in your head? Like, I would love to hush them and crush them. Like, how do I do that when they're on that constant repeat? They're stuck in repeat in my head. And so what I want you to do now, come with me. I want you to take just a few little baby steps with me here so that you can kind of start to think about this a little bit differently, a different perspective. Now, if the third principle boils down to life is consciousness, which it does, right? Then we need a very easy and simple way to understand how our thoughts work. Because life is consciousness. I mean, it says everything, right? It says it all. And yet, doesn't say anything about how to deal with it. And so, here it is. I'm going to give it to you. Here it is. One of my spiritual teachers is Carolyn Mays. Now, Carolyn offers us a fantastic, really simple metaphor that describes different levels of consciousness. And she does it in such a way that it truly is crystal clear. And so she uses the idea of a 12-story building. So in your mind's eye, now this is not a complicated building. This is like, stick people. This is just a very simple drawing of, a 12-story building. And if you imagine that you live in a 12-story building on just the first floor, and you don't ever leave that floor, right? You don't go outside. You don't go anywhere but just that floor. All you would know is just the sounds of the city going on outside, right? I mean, that's all you'd hear because that's all you'd ever know. However, the person that is living on the top floor, the penthouse, that person would have a totally different perspective. Why? Because from their panoramic penthouse view, they could see a gorgeous world, right? With blue skies and mountains and lakes and green grass. But here's the thing, you would never know while you're living only on the first floor with all the street noise. You would actually never know that you share the same address as that individual, that person that's up in the penthouse. You share the same address. And so if you think of each floor in this building as a level of consciousness, then you have to ask yourself, what are you willing to do? What is it going to take for you to get on that elevator and move right on up to the penthouse so that you can see a different perspective, so that you can expand your spiritual understanding, so that you can expand your capacity to see a bigger picture? What's it going to take for you to get on that elevator and moving on up, right? Now, if you leave with nothing else today, I really want you to catch this idea. You know, we are in no way, shape, or form trying to run away from life's challenges, you know, just somehow have like a challenge-free life, because that's just not possible. What we do want to do is to cultivate and expand our inner dialogue that then helps shift, creates these, they can be small, but they can also be monumental shifts in what we think and how we think, so that then we can come into alignment with our understanding of God, the God of our being, our understanding of God, God by whatever name you know God. And quite honestly, so that we're not always feeling like we're pushing like a 1,000,000-pound boulder up a hill. That is, you know, that we are here to express God, right? We're not always meant to be feeling like we are pushing a boulder up a hill. And so when you feel like you want to change your thoughts, you know, because Louise Hay would say, it's only a thought, and a thought can be changed. So when you want to change your thoughts, but they're stuck on repeat, I want you to think about this metaphor of the 12-story building, and about how you can take that symbolic elevator to go right on up, so that you can get a different perspective, a higher perspective, and a broader view. And so your heart work this week is to mind your mind. Actually, whether I say it or not, that is always your heart work. It's always your heart work. Mind your mind. Train your brain. Practice, 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 and simply pay attention to the quality of your thoughts, and be aware of the energy in which you are creating your precious life. In other words, focus on what you do want, not on what you don't want. And catch yourself, right? Catch yourself when you do. And then just gently remember that you are only as stuck on that first floor as you want to be, because there is an elevator that is inviting you, that is just there waiting for you to take you up to the penthouse view. But you, boo, you have to get on it, and you have to press the button to the top. And so ends our message for today. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you.